For almost 2 decades, Rodan Fields promised confidence, community, and financial freedom to hundreds of thousands of women. And for a while, it seemed like it was working. But of course, it all went wrong. And the fallout from the brand's mistakes have led to a drastic change in how they sell their products. So how did the founders who built not one, but $2 billion beauty companies go from having one of the biggest skincare brands around with an army of over 400,000 consultants to seeing their revenue plummet and the consultants leave in droves in the space of just a few short years? Behind the flood of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram posts praising everything the brand ever did, there were signs that everything wasn't as perfect as it seemed. A controversial business model, dodgy marketing claims, and a seemingly never-ending list of lawsuits have caused serious damage to the reputation of the brand that at one point looked pretty much unstoppable. Now the brand is trying to reinvent itself once again, but to work out if they can actually make a comeback or not, we need to know how everything started and how it all went so wrong. Chapter 1: The Prequel Story. Rodan Fields, which you've probably actually heard of before, was founded by 2 dermatologists named Dr. Katie Rodan and Dr. Kathy Fields. But before we get into the details of the brand they named after themselves, we need to talk about their first attempt at making it into the world of skincare. You might assume that they created Rodan Fields because their first brand flopped, but the truth is it was one of the most successful skincare brands of the 90s. Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields met in the 80s whilst working as young dermatology residents at Stanford University School of Medicine, and they quickly became friends, sharing a passion and ambition to help people deal with one of the most common skin conditions around, being acne. In the early 90s, they noticed that most acne treatments at the time were either prescription only, or as we know, they were harsh, over-the-counter products that stripped the skin and didn't offer long-term results. That's like all 90s skincare, right? It wasn't the best. And this is when Katie and Kathy saw a chance to give people something different, something so much better, a skincare system that worked like a dermatologist treatment plan for acne, but that could be sold directly to consumers. After spending a couple of years developing the products, Proactiv solution was born in 1995. It involved a 3-step anti-acne routine that was built around benzoyl peroxide that was arguably gentler and more consistent than what was available in drugstores. The routine consisted of a BPO cleanser, a glycolic toner, and a treatment lotion, and it was marketed as a complete skin management routine rather than as one-off like products. You had to buy it all together. The products were good at the time, and people who tried them generally loved them, but what really made Proactiv a success was their marketing. After failing to get any distribution details and being turned down by Neutrogena, Kate and Kathy ended up partnering with Guthy Renker, oh my god, one of the most successful direct marketing companies in the world. I've talked about them in another video, but I can't remember what one it was. The partnership proved to be a very good move for them. Rather than being on the shelves in drugstores or department stores, they sold their products directly to consumers through TV ads, magazine ads, and probably some of the most iconic celebrity endorsements of all time, and most of all through what Guthy Renker specialized in, which was infomercials. Katie and Kathy said that they were initially very reluctant to sell their products through infomercials, saying that it felt kind of icky, but it was those infomercials that really did help Proactiv establish itself. That it gave the brand time to explain how and why their regimes worked, and to get across their dermatologist credentials, which helped to build trust. This partnership also meant that suddenly Proactiv was everywhere and was being praised by some of the biggest celebrities around, like Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and Alyssa Milano very early on, as well as Justin Bieber and Katy Perry in later years. Whether they actually used them or not, we don't know, but they were all talking about how Proactiv actively changed their skin for the better. And before long, they had become one of the most recognizable skincare brands in the world, making hundreds of millions of dollars a year and dominating the acne market for more than a decade. And despite Proactiv's success, Katie and Kathy weren't running the day-to-day business, saying that they were dermatologists and entrepreneurs at heart, not company executives. They wanted to do something new and to keep creating skincare products that made a difference in people's lives. So they eventually sold their rights in Proactiv to Guthy Renker, still remaining as the faces and voices of the brand, but moving on to their next big idea. Chapter 2, Rodan Fields 1.0. So by the end of the 90s, Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields had noticed that the skincare industry was changing. Skincare enthusiasts were becoming more proactive. And things like anti-aging, sun protection, and long-term skin health was taking center stage. So this time they decided that they wanted to try and bring people dermatologist-level skincare for every major skin concern, not just for acne. And after years of development, they were ready to launch in 2002, naming the company after themselves, simply called Rodan Fields. And like Proactiv, the idea wasn't just to create individual products for individual skin concerns, but to create routines consisting of multiple products that together would help address certain skin issues. And these initial routines were redefine, focusing on fine lines, wrinkles, and firmness, including products like a cleansing mask, a rejuvenating toner, a night renewing serum, and a moisturizer with SPF 15. There was reverse, aimed at sun damage, uneven skin tone, and dark spots, including a skin lightening lotion, an exfoliating wash, and a clarifying toner, and a moisturizer with SPF 30. Then there was unblemish, targeted at adult acne, including a clarifying cleanser with 2% salicylic acid, an antibacterial toner, an acne treatment with benzoyl peroxide and sulfur, and a lightweight SPF 20 moisturizer. Then there was Soothe, creative for sensitive, irritated, or redness-prone skin, including a gentle cleanser, an alcohol-free toner, and a barrier-repairing moisturizer, as well as an SPF 15 mineral sunscreen. Now, these products weren't cheap though, with each regime setting you back well over like $100, but most customers felt like they were getting high quality and most importantly, effective products. And although the prices were higher than mass-produced brands like Neutrogena or Olay, for example, they were still lower than legacy prestige brands like Estee Lauder and Lancome. And they were getting these like derm-approved products, right? And unlike Proactiv, this new brand wasn't going to be sold through infomercials. Instead, it started out in high-end department stores, specifically Nordstrom, where they had an exclusive deal at first, though they later landed in other high-end stores like Bloomingdale's and Macy's. The idea was to position it as a premium dermatology brand that combines science with accessibility. And their products address things like fine lines, discoloration, sensitivity, and sun damage, basically everything that you might go to a dermatologist's office for. And the brand received pretty solid reviews in those days, and well, the very early days, especially for its clinical focus and clean, minimalist packaging. Oh no, not that kind of clean. Just very minimal, tidy looking packaging. Sorry, clean is a trigger word. I just immediately do this. But in the crowded world of prestige skincare at the time, it didn't immediately stand out at all. Retail distribution was expensive, and Rodan Fields wasn't yet a household name outside of like dermatology circles. However, though, just a year after launching, they caught the eye of Estee Lauder, who saw a potential in Estee Lauder company, sorry, the big conglomerate, who saw potential in Rodan Fields, this new, young, exciting dermatologist-backed brand, and they saw a chance to capture the growing kind of clinical skincare market that brands like Clinique and Dermalogica were already seeing success in. So in July of 2003, Estee Lauder acquired Rodan Fields for an undisclosed amount, adding it to their already pretty large portfolio of luxury skincare brands, beauty brands. For most entrepreneurs, that would be the end of the story. Like, Katie and Rodan and Kathy Fields had already built two very successful skincare brands and sold them both to major companies. Most would take their money and go and enjoy their lives. But for Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields, this was only the beginning. Chapter 3, Rodan Fields Reinvented. A few years after selling to Estee Lauder, Rodan Fields noticed that their namesake brand wasn't growing quite as quickly or having the same kind of impact on skincare as they had originally hoped it would. Being owned by Estee Lauder really should have given the brand some sense of legitimacy, and their resources were supposed to allow Rodan Fields to reach a much wider audience, but that just wasn't happening. No one cared. The brand was small, very small compared to many others in Estee Lauder's portfolio, so it wasn't getting as much attention or promotion from its new parent company. And as a result, Rodan Fields was stagnating, sitting quietly on department store shelves, gathering dust while bigger names flew off the shelves right next to them. It was a J-Lo situation, you know? This wasn't what Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields had envisioned for their brand. So in a bold and pretty unusual move, they bought back their company from Estee Lauder in 2007. But now they had to find a new way to get their products into the hand of consumers, and all on their own this time. And they settled on a method that is sometimes effective, but always controversial: a multi-level marketing scheme. So just in case you haven't heard of this business model yet, I kind of became obsessed with MLM exposés on YouTube for a while. It's basically when a company lets people sign up as consultants who earn a commission for selling the company's products. They can also recruit others to sign up as consultants, and then they also get a percentage of the sales made by anyone they recruited. Many companies who use this model say that the idea is that everyday people, most often women, most often mothers, could become independent consultants, selling products directly to friends, families, and their social networks, earning commission and building teams beneath them. They often claim it's a way to work part-time and have an income while still being able to stay at home and, raise the kids. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way for most people, but we'll get into that in the next chapter. This type of model actually wasn't new. When Rodan Fields adopted it, it had been around since the 1930s, and well-known brands like Avon, Mary Kay, and Herbalife had been doing it for decades. But the 2000s and the 2010s saw an explosion of MLMs across all sorts of industries, many seeing huge success. So Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields felt like it was the perfect way to move forward, and it proved to be a profitable choice for the founders. The financial crisis was about to hit, so there would be a huge number of, let's be honest, pretty desperate people who were desperate for another source of income. And the rise of social media, especially Facebook, Twitter, and later Instagram, helped give consultants in these MLMs an easy way to turn the social circles into marketing channels. That's why we saw such a huge boom in MLMs during the late 2000s and the early 2010s. Rodan and Fields got in at the perfect time to take advantage of this boom. In the first few years, they saw a small increase in sales while they were growing their number of consultants and establishing themselves in the world of MLMs. In 2010, they had an annual revenue of $24 million. Just 5 years later, they had exploded to $627 million in 2015. By this point, they were one of the fastest growing skincare brands in the US, and by 2016, after expanding into Canada the year before, they'd become the #1 skincare brand in North America based on total revenue. And this was all thanks to the success they had in recruiting new consultants and expanding their MLM model. Early on, they brought in executives from Nu Skin, another successful MLM, and they helped the company reach around 75,000 consultants by early 2015. And after expanding into Australia in 2017, they reached over 300,000 active consultants across the US, Canada, and Australia by 2018. The brand's growth was outstanding, really. They finally exceeded $1 billion in revenue in 2017, and this increased to $1.5 billion the very next year, with the company being valued at around $4 billion by industry analysts. Sorry, I'm so jet lagged, putting them in the same league as some of the biggest legacy beauty brands in the world. This was all achieved through consultants sharing their transformation photos, motivational posts, and aspirational income stories on their social media accounts, and through in-person presentations. They portrayed Rodan and Fields as more than just a skincare brand, but as a community and a lifestyle that promised financial independence, personal empowerment, and glowing skin all at once. The usual MLM bullshit. And the company really leaned so heavily into that narrative. Corporate conventions felt like these culty rallies complete with music, lights, and success stories that echoed the tone of these self-help seminars. It was part beauty brand, part women empowerment movement, at least in the way the company and the consultants talked about it. But all this success drew people's attention, and with that came scrutiny. Behind the scenes, whispers were growing louder about the sustainability of the MLM model, the high buy-ins required of consultants, and how much profit the average seller was actually making. And as what usually happens with MLMs, the cracks were beginning to show, and those cracks were about to widen. Chapter 4: The controversies start to pile up. The MLM model had always been controversial, and as soon as they adopted it, Rodan and Fields understandably started to receive backlash about the decision. MLMs are very well known for the way they regularly manipulate and take advantage of their consultants, but there was still more than enough people who'd either never heard of an MLM, didn't know what the negatives were, or were just willing to trust that Rodan and Fields was in some way different. So for years, Rodan and Fields' number of consultants continued to grow at a real astonishing pace, and the first real controversy didn't arrive until 2015 when Allure published an article discussing how Rodan and Fields consultants had taken over Facebook feeds, how the really successful ones made the majority of their income from recruiting rather than from selling the products, and essentially pointing out that it all just seemed like another pyramid scheme. A lot of defenders of Rodan and Fields' MLM structure say that although it may sound like a pyramid scheme, it's not in this case, because unlike other MLMs, which might have shoddy products in their opinion, Rodan and Fields' products actually worked, so it's not like anyone's losing out. What they seem to be forgetting though is that it's usually the consultants who are getting screwed over with this kind of business model, not the end consumer. One consultant that they interviewed admitted that 95% of her income with Rodan and Fields came from the commission she received from the thousands of people in her downline. But everyone can't do that. If every consultant had thousands of people under them, then there wouldn't be anyone left to actually buy the products. It's always the people who get in early and convince others to join that actually make money from these schemes. The ones who join later on, or the people who actually focus on selling products rather than recruiting, they generally make little to no money at all, or end up losing money and having a shit ton of product in their house. The cost to get started as a Rodan and Fields consultant could vary widely depending on what starter package you went with, but most new consultants pay between $400 and $1,000 for starter product kits and marketing materials. And a huge percentage of these people likely never made their initial investment back, and things got even worse for Rodan and Fields when the company's own income disclosure statement was spread online. I don't know whether it's leaked or just got around, showing that the vast majority of consultants made almost nothing in 2017. The report showed that out of all the paid consultants, around 90% made an annual income of $2,000 or less, with the top 10% making an average of just $4,839 per year. Only the very top tier, who had recruited large downlines, were making the kind of life-changing money that was often talked about in these social media posts that Rodan and Fields made look like everyone was doing when they were selling these products. In fact, just 0.3% of paid consultants made over six figures, despite this kind of earning potential being used as an incentive by recruiters to get others to sign up. And at the other end, 59.3% of all paid consultants made an average of $325 per year. Excuse me. You may have noticed that I said paid consultants several times there, and that's because this report also only took into account consultants who had actually successfully sold anything in 2017. Those figures don't include the estimated 125,000 consultants who failed to make a single sale from their association with Rodan and Fields. So with figures like these, it's unsurprising that Rodan and Fields apparently had a policy that consultants weren't allowed to disclose their personal income from the business. And unsurprisingly, this news led to widespread criticism of the brand structure, including former consultants speaking out about their experience with Rodan and Fields who felt misled by the people who recruited them, who claimed that the system was unsustainable and that many of them spent thousands on starter kits, sample products and marketing materials and got little to nothing in return. There was even another article a few months later in Forbes which also criticized the brand's business model, pointing out that top-level consultants often said things like, "We wash our face, talk about it and get paid. That's simple," and regularly made claims that the consultants were making full-time incomes, when the truth actually was that only 2% of active consultants made the minimum wage from their affiliation with the brand. For years and years, Rodan and Fields promoted itself as a vehicle for female empowerment, with their high-level consultants turned recruiters sharing stories of quitting their day jobs, paying off debt, or even buying a dream home with their consultant income. But many kind of pretty much rightfully saw this image as a facade, hiding the reality that the brand was actually making a significant portion of its revenue from selling business starter kits and product samples to the consultants rather than selling their actual products to actual consumers. Once again, things got even worse for the brand shortly after all of this came out, when they were hit with multiple class action lawsuits in 2018 related to their popular Lash Boost product, a serum that claims to give you longer looking lashes in 4 weeks. And I've done a longer video on this that you can watch here, but the lawsuits are basically based on the accusation that Lash Boost contained an ingredient called isopropyl chlorprostonate, which poses potentially really harmful risks that the brand failed to adequately disclose. And you'll find this with a lot of eyelash serums. The plaintiffs argue that the ingredient functions like a drug, working very similarly to prescription lash growth serums and therefore needs to meet the appropriate FDA regulations, which they say it currently does not. The lawsuit goes on to claim that Rodan Fields was deceptive in its marketing of the product, saying it was a cosmetic and that the company failed to adequately warn consumers of the potential side effects such as eye irritation, eyelid drooping, and even potentially changing the colors of your iris. And this situation dragged on for years and years until, as is so often with these cases and lawsuits, Rodan Fields settled without admitting any wrongdoing, agreeing to pay out $38 million in 2022. And even more pressure on the brand's practices, particularly their business model, continued to grow. It seemed like they couldn't go more than a couple of years without some kind of major controversy anymore, and it all came courtesy of the Federal Trade Commission. In 2020, the FTC sent out a warning letter to multiple MLMs, including Rodan Fields, regarding the potentially misleading claims that their consultants were making online, specifically in regards to the COVID pandemic. Some of the MLMs involved, or rather their consultants, were apparently making unproven and misleading health claims about their products, like how they could cure or prevent COVID, as well as making misleading financial claims about how much money you could actually make or how quickly you can make it if you signed up as a consultant. In the case of Rodan and Fields, or their consultants again, they were only accused of making financial claims that were misleading and unproven. They apparently weren't making any health claims that were the issue. I mean, you can't really, like, skincare isn't going to cure COVID, but still. The FTC said that after reviewing social media posts made by Rodan Fields representatives or business opportunity participants, they felt that some of these posts were unlawfully misrepresenting that consumers who became Rodan Fields consultants were likely to earn a substantial income from it. Basically saying, like, you're not going to make money from this. They actually even listed some examples of the claims made in their letter to Rodan Fields. One said, "Rodan Fields is always open for business, even during quarantine. I've been working from home for over 3 years now and still making money, when other people aren't. Isn't it time that you found out what it is I do and how this company really works? Hashtag work from home, hashtag financial freedom." Whilst another post said, "During an uncertain time like this, one thing I'm grateful for is residual income from my home-based business. If you're struggling and could use an extra few $100s a month, why not give this a try? Hashtag residual income. I have spots available on my team. If you want to make an extra $200, $500, or $1,000 a month, message me." Now, the FTC took issue with these kinds of posts because making express or implied earning claims is illegal if they are false, misleading, or unsustained. And given that the majority of Rodan Fields consultants make little to no money from their affiliation with the brand whatsoever, any claim or implication that you could achieve a wealthy lifestyle, career level income, or significant income is seen as false and misleading. The FTC reminded the company that they are responsible for the claims their consultants make, and told Rodan Fields to remind their consultants that they need to comply with the federal guidelines and to remove or correct any misleading posts that they had made. Chapter 5: Moving away from MLMs. For a company built on the idea of empowering women and providing products you could trust, all their controversies were a major blow to their image. And this led to big problems for their brand because, like many MLMs these days, their brand is built through people talking about and promoting it on social media. But instead of spreading this positive news about Rodan Fields, a lot of people were now using social media to spread negative stories about the brand and to warn people about the dangers of MLMs. And this is very bad news if you're a consultant for Rodan Fields who relies on social media to sell products and to convince more people to sign up. And as a result, the brand has seen a significant drop in the number of people signing up to be consultants, as well as former consultants leaving at a much faster rate. In 2018, Rodan Fields were reported to have around 411,000 consultants working for them, and by 2019, that had dropped pretty dramatically to 362,000 after the Lash Boost controversy and their consultants' financial reports being released the year before. And these numbers apparently continue to fall steadily, with some sources saying it had dropped to under 200,000 in the following years. And as more people became aware that Rodan Fields was actually an MLM and that MLMs aren't a good thing, it became harder and harder for Rodan Fields to continue making money at the ridiculous rate that they had been. And after hitting a high point in 2018 with an annual revenue of an estimated 1.6 billion, this dropped noticeably to an estimated 1.3 billion in 2019 and fell even more dramatically over the next few years to around 700 million in 2022. So it is perhaps unsurprising that the company announced that they would be moving away from the MLM model in 2024. They said that as of September 2024, the brand would transition to an affiliate program where their existing consultants could continue to sell their products and would earn a commission from those sales, but that they would no longer earn commission from consultants that they had recruited. You could also bypass the consultants altogether and just buy the products from the company website or from more traditional sales channels. They said that they were making these changes to reach new customers and to help them compete with other online platforms like TikTok and Amazon. But it's worth noting actually that in the post they made about the change of their website, they felt the need to clarify that Rodan Fields isn't a pyramid scheme and that they would no longer be an MLM either. I think that probably hints that the backlash they'd received for their old business model has at least played some part in their decision to change. As part of this new direction for the business, they also announced that they'd received $75 million in funding from investors to strengthen their capital structure and financial position, which some also think indicates that Rodan Fields had been struggling financially recently due to their many controversies. Whatever the reasoning behind it, most people actually felt that this move was a positive for the brand, finally getting away from that controversial business model. I've forgotten how I say controversial. Controversial. Yes, not controversial. Getting away from that business model that put off a lot of consumers, regardless of the quality of products. Obviously, the small number of consultants who had actually been making a pretty decent amount of money from the MLM structure were not happy about this change. But the ones who'd actually focused on selling the products rather than recruiting others were generally quite happy about it, as now they had received a higher commission rate of 30% per sale, giving them a better chance of making actual money. But despite this change, Rodan Fields' history as an MLM is pretty much continuing to haunt them. In 2014, 3 women, all former Rodan Fields consultants, brought a class action lawsuit against the company on behalf of themselves and also anyone else in a similar situation, alleging that Rodan Fields has exploited its California sales force by misclassifying them as independent contractors rather than employees. The misclassification, in turn, meant that the company had failed to meet California labor law standards, such as failing to compensate their workers for the minimum legally mandated wage, failed to pay overtime and minimum wages, did not reimburse business expenses, and did not provide meal rest breaks or accurate wage statements, amongst many other things. Again, Rodan Fields agreed to settle the case rather than go to court, agreeing in July of 2025 to pay $8 million to plaintiffs, though as expected, the brand didn't admit to any wrongdoing, preferring to just pay and get the whole thing done and out the way. So that's the story really of how 2 dermatologists built one of the most successful skincare brands in the world, as well as one of the most controversial. It's kind of ironic that this is where they would end up, given that back in the 90s, they had reservations about using infomercials to sell Proactiv because it felt icky, but apparently they were fine with using a business model that's well known for manipulating and taking advantage of its participants. It seems like a strange choice for a brand that the founders named after themselves, and a brand that they claim is all about female empowerment and giving women the best skin they've ever had through science-backed, trustworthy products. But with their latest lawsuit finally settled, it does remain to be seen if Rodan Fields can successfully put their past behind them, rebuild trust, and move forward as a brand that is actually built on the efficacy of their products, or if their image will always be tainted by their history as an MLM. Like, would you trust Rodan Fields now that they changed their business model? Or does their MLM past put you off? Or do you think it never really mattered how they sold their products as long as the products worked? Personally, I don't want to touch this stuff. The whole thing just feels a bit icky.